I still remember the exact moment my life split into two distinct timelines, the before and the after. It was a Tuesday evening in Boston, October 2019. The autumn leaves were performing their annual death dance outside my apartment window, brilliant shades of amber and crimson swirling in the wind like secrets refusing to stay buried. My name is Elizabeth Chen, though everyone calls me Liza. I'm 34 years old now, but this story begins when I was 7 in a small town in upstate New York where everyone knew everyone, and secrets were the currency we traded in whispers behind white picket fences. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start with that Tuesday evening, because that's when everything I'd spent 27 years carefully constructing began to crumble. I was sitting at my desk in my corner office at Henderson & Associates, one of Boston's most prestigious marketing firms. Outside, the city was transitioning from day to night, office lights blinking on like stars in a concrete sky. My fingers hovered over my keyboard, frozen mid-sentence in an email I'd been trying to write for the past hour. The email was to my fiancé, Marcus. Subject line, "We need to talk." 4 words. 4 simple words that felt like boulders on my tongue. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Don't forget Sunday dinner. Your father's making his famous pot roast. Marcus is coming, right? We need to discuss the wedding venue." The wedding. 3 months away. Everything planned to perfection. The venue at the historic Fairmont Estate, the dress from that exclusive boutique in Back Bay, 200 guests, a string quartet, white roses, and baby's breath. My mother had been planning this wedding since I was born, I think. The perfect daughter, marrying the perfect man, in the perfect ceremony. Only none of it was perfect. None of it was even real. I deleted the email draft and shut my laptop. The office was mostly empty now, just the cleaning crew making their rounds, the soft hum of vacuum cleaners providing a strange soundtrack to my unraveling thoughts. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window. Sleek black hair pulled into a professional bun, designer blazer, pearl earrings, the uniform of success. But behind my eyes, I saw something else. Someone else. A 7-year-old girl with scraped knees and tangled hair, hiding in a closet, hands pressed over her ears, trying to block out the sounds of her parents' marriage destroying itself one screaming match at a time. That little girl was still inside me, I realized. She'd been there all along, waiting. My phone rang. Marcus. His face filled the screen. Handsome, kind, successful. Marcus Chen, senior investment banker, Harvard graduate, my parents' dream son-in-law. We'd met at a networking event 3 years ago, been dating for 2.5 years, engaged for 6 months. I let it go to voicemail. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a small key, the one I kept hidden beneath old business cards and forgotten receipts. This key opened a locked box in my apartment, a box I hadn't touched in months, a box that contained the only honest thing in my entire carefully curated life. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and left the office without saying goodbye to anyone. The streets of Boston were alive with evening commuters, people rushing home to their real lives, their authentic selves. I wondered how many of them were wearing masks like mine, how many were performing roles they'd been assigned rather than living lives they'd chosen. The subway ride to Beacon Hill felt longer than usual. I sat wedged between a college student with headphones and an elderly woman with a canvas shopping bag, watching the darkness of the tunnel flash by outside the windows. In the reflection of the glass, I saw myself, polished, professional, completely hollow. When had I become this person? When had I traded authenticity for acceptance, truth for tranquility? I knew the answer, of course. I'd been making that trade my entire life, one small compromise at a time, until the real me had disappeared entirely beneath layers of performance and pretense. My apartment in Beacon Hill was everything I'd worked for. Exposed brick, high ceilings, a view of the Charles River. It screamed success, sophistication, the life I'd built from nothing. Well, not nothing exactly. From lies. From carefully constructed half-truths and strategic omissions. I poured myself a glass of wine, a Cabernet Sauvignon that cost more than my first car, and sat on my leather couch, the box in front of me on the coffee table. It was wooden, cherry-stained, about the size of a shoebox. I'd bought it at an antique store in Vermont during a solo trip 5 years ago, back when I still took solo trips, before Marcus, before the engagement, before I'd committed fully to the performance of my life. The key turned with a soft click. Inside,
photographs, letters, a journal with a worn leather cover, and a small rainbow flag pin. My hands trembled as I picked up the first photograph. 2 young women, arms around each other, laughing at the camera. One of them was me, 23 years old, with longer hair and a freer smile than I'd worn in years. The other was Sarah Mitchell. Sarah. Even her name sent a jolt through my chest, a combination of pain and longing so intense it took my breath away. We'd met in graduate school at NYU. I was studying marketing, she was in the fine arts program. Our apartments were in the same building, and we'd struck up a conversation in the laundry room one Sunday afternoon. She'd been wearing paint-splattered overalls and had this wild, curly red hair that seemed to have a life of its own. She was reading Sylvia Plath while waiting for her clothes to dry. Depressing choice for laundry day, I'd said. She'd looked up, green eyes sparkling. I find catharsis in darkness. You? I'd held up my book, a marketing textbook. I find profit in consumer psychology. She'd laughed, a sound like wind chimes. Well, at least you're honest about it. We'd become inseparable after that. Study sessions that turned into long conversations about art and life and everything in between. Gallery visits, late-night diners, walks through Central Park. It was the first time in my life I'd felt truly myself with another person. Sarah had this way of seeing through people's defenses, of cutting through bullshit with a single observation. Within a month of knowing her, she'd figured out more about me than my parents had learned in 23 years. You're hiding something, she'd said one night over Thai food in the East Village. I can't figure out what, but you're performing all the time. Even with me. I'm not performing, I'd protested weakly. Liza, I'm an artist. I study people for a living. You have this thing you do where your smile doesn't quite reach your eyes, where you calculate everything you say before you say it. It's like you're constantly editing yourself. I've wanted to deny it, but she was right. I was always editing, always calculating, always making sure I said and did the right things to maintain the image I'd constructed. I've spent my whole life being the good Chinese daughter, I'd finally admitted. Sometimes I forget where the performance ends and the real me begins. Then maybe you should spend some time figuring that out, she'd said gently. Because the glimpses I've seen of the real you, she's pretty amazing. That conversation had been the beginning of something. Sarah had become my safe space, the one person I could be honest with about my doubts, my fears, my carefully hidden dreams. And then one rainy April night, everything changed. We'd been at her apartment, drinking cheap wine and listening to Joni Mitchell. Sarah had just had a piece rejected from a gallery she'd been hoping to break into, and I'd come over to cheer her up. We were sitting on her floor, backs against her bed, and she'd turned to me with tears in her eyes. Liza, do you ever feel like you're living the wrong life? She'd asked. What do you mean? Like the life you're living is just a draft, and somewhere out there is the real version, the one you're supposed to be living, but you can't quite reach it. I'd understood exactly what she meant. Every single day, I'd whispered. She'd taken my hand then, her fingers intertwining with mine, and suddenly my heart was racing and the world had narrowed to just us. Just that moment. Just the truth I'd been running from my entire life. Liza, she'd said softly, I think I'm falling in love with you. And I'd kissed her. God, I'd kissed her like she was oxygen and I'd been drowning my whole life. That kiss was the most honest moment of my existence. The world had tilted on its axis that night. Everything I'd believed about myself, everything I'd been taught about who I was supposed to be, had shattered in an instant. And in the wreckage, I'd found something I'd been searching for my entire life. Myself. We'd stayed up all night talking, kissing, exploring this new territory between us. Sarah had been out since college, comfortable in her identity, patient with my confusion. I'd started, not sure how to finish the sentence. I know, she said. We'll figure it out together. And we had. For 2 beautiful, terrifying years, we'd figured it out together. Those 2 years had been the happiest of my life. We'd moved in together after 6 months, a tiny apartment in Brooklyn that was barely big enough for both of us and Sarah's art supplies, but it had been ours. I'd wake up to her painting in the morning light, coffee brewing, her humming along to whatever music she was obsessed with that week. We'd explored the city together, finding hidden galleries and hole-in-wall restaurants. We'd spent weekends in Central Park, Sarah sketching while I read marketing journals, our legs tangled together on a blanket. We'd hosted dinner parties for our friends, a mix of artists and grad students and people who were still figuring out who they wanted to be. I'd been happy, genuinely, authentically happy, but I'd also been terrified. Because while I'd found myself with Sarah, I'd also been hiding her from everyone else. My parents thought I was single, focused on my studies. They'd call every Sunday, and I'd step out onto the fire escape to take the call, lowering my voice so Sarah wouldn't hear me lie about my life. Any nice young men in your program? My mother would ask. I'm too busy studying to date, Mom. You need to make time, Elizabeth. You're not getting any younger. By the time I was your age, I was already married with you on the way. The guilt would eat at me every time. Here I was, living with a woman I love, building a life that would horrify my parents if they knew. The disconnect between my 2 worlds felt insurmountable. Sarah had been patient at first. She'd understood that coming out was a process, that everyone moved at their own pace. But as months turned into a year, then into 18 months, her patience had started to wear thin. When are you going to tell them about me? She'd asked. Soon. I just need to find the right time. There's never going to be a right time, Liza. My cousin is getting married next month. After that, I'll tell them. But I never did. There was always another excuse, another reason to wait. My grandmother's health, my father's work stress, my brother's college applications. I'd become an expert at finding reasons to delay the inevitable.
The tension between us had grown. Sarah had wanted to attend my graduation ceremony, to meet my family, to exist openly as my girlfriend. I'd asked her to stay home, to remain a secret, to give me more time. I'm not asking you to march in pride parades or make grand announcements, she'd said, frustration clear in her voice. I'm just asking to exist, to be acknowledged, to not have to pretend we're roommates when your parents call. I know, I'm sorry. I just need more time. But time had run out sooner than either of us expected. My father had his first heart attack in August, 2 months before I was supposed to finish my master's program. I'd gotten the call at 3 a.m, my mother, hysterical, barely coherent. Your father collapsed. We're at the hospital. You need to come home. Now. I'd thrown clothes into a bag, left a note for Sarah, and caught the first train to upstate New York. The 6-hour journey had felt like an eternity, every worst-case scenario playing through my mind. My father had survived, but barely. Triple bypass surgery, weeks of recovery ahead, his mortality suddenly real and terrifying. I'd stayed home for 2 weeks, sleeping in my childhood bedroom, helping my mother navigate insurance and hospital visits and medication schedules. My brother David was away at college, and someone needed to be there. Sarah had been understanding, calling every night, telling me to take all the time I needed. But there'd been a distance in her voice, a weariness that came from being kept secret for so long. One night, sitting in the hospital cafeteria while my father slept, my mother had grabbed my hand. Elizabeth, your father needs something to look forward to, something to fight for. He's going to be fine, Mom. The doctor said he needs to know that our family legacy will continue. He needs to know that you're settled, taken care of. And there it was, the weight of expectation, the burden of being the good daughter. Mom, I'm 25. I have my whole life ahead of me. I was married with a baby at 25. Your father worked 3 jobs to put you through school. All he's ever wanted is to see you happy, settled with a good man. The guilt had crushed me. My father lying in a hospital bed recovering from heart surgery, and my mother asking me to give him the one thing I couldn't give. After he's recovered, we'll talk about my love life, I'd promised, the lie bitter on my tongue. But my mother had taken that as encouragement. Over the following weeks, as my father slowly recovered, she'd started mentioning eligible bachelors, her friend's nephew, the doctor, her colleague's son, the lawyer, the son of a family from church who'd just moved back to town after finishing business school. Just meet him for coffee, she pleaded. What could it hurt? Everything, I'd wanted to say. It could hurt everything. But I'd been weak, tired, overwhelmed by the responsibility of my father's recovery and the weight of my mother's expectations. So I'd said yes to coffee with the business school graduate, a pleasant enough guy named Andrew, who talked about his 5-year plan and asked me about mine. I'd felt nothing, no spark, no interest, no possibility. But my mother had been so happy when I told her we'd had a nice time that I'd agreed to a second coffee, then a third. Sarah had known something was wrong. You've been distant, she'd said when I'd finally returned to New York. What's going on? My father almost died. I'm dealing with a lot. I understand that. But Liza, you're pulling away from me. I can feel it. I'm not pulling away. I'm just stressed. But I was pulling away because every day I spent with my family, every conversation with my mother about my future, every expectation placed on my shoulders had reinforced the impossibility of my situation. How could I tell my parents? How could I explain that their daughter, their investment, their hope for the future was in love with a woman? How could I add that stress to my father's recovery? The answer was, I couldn't. 3 months after my father's heart attack, I'd made the decision that would haunt me for the next 7 years. I'd gone to Sarah's apartment, our apartment, though I'd already started emotionally moving out. She'd been painting, lost in her work, and when she'd seen my face, she'd put down her brush. What's wrong? I can't do this anymore. The words had hung in the air between us, sharp and final.
Can't do what? But she'd known. I could see it in her eyes. This, us. I can't keep living two lives. I can't keep lying to my family. I can't keep asking you to be my secret. Then stop lying, she'd said, her voice breaking. Come out. Tell them about us. Liza, we can get through this together. My father almost died. My mother is barely holding it together. I can't add this to their plate right now. So when? When is the right time, Liza? After your father's fully recovered? After your brother graduates? After your grandmother passes away? There's always going to be something. I just need more time. No. Sarah had stood up, paint smeared on her hands, tears streaming down her face. No. You need courage, and I can't give that to you. I've been patient. I've been understanding. I've hidden and lied and pretended for 2 years, waiting for you to be ready. But you're never going to be ready, are you? That's not fair. What's not fair is asking me to love you in secret. What's not fair is asking me to be the skeleton in your closet because you're too afraid to disappoint your parents. I love you, Liza. I love you so much it hurts. But I can't keep being your dirty little secret. You're not. I am. I'm the part of your life you're ashamed of, the part you hide. And I deserve better than that. I deserve someone who's proud to be with me, who doesn't flinch when I try to hold their hand in public, who doesn't make me pretend to be a roommate when their family calls. I knew she was right, but the fear had been stronger than my love, stronger than my desire to be authentic, stronger than anything. I'm sorry, I'd whispered. I'm so sorry, Sarah, but I can't choose you over my family. The look on her face would haunt me forever. Pain and disappointment, and a weariness that came from loving someone who couldn't love themselves enough to be honest. Then you're choosing to be miserable, she'd said quietly. And I hope that makes your parents happy, Liza, because it's going to destroy you. Living a lie will hollow you out from the inside until there's nothing left but the performance. She'd been right about that too. I'd moved out that weekend, finding a studio apartment in Manhattan that I could barely afford. I'd thrown myself into finishing my degree, into job applications, into anything that would keep me from thinking about what I'd lost. Sarah had tried to reach out a few times in those first weeks, text messages asking if I was okay, if we could talk. I'd ignored them all. Eventually, they'd stopped coming. I'd graduated in December, alone, gotten a job at a marketing firm in Hartford, alone, moved to Connecticut, alone, built a life that looked successful on the outside, while I slowly died on the inside. After Sarah, I'd become a master of performance. I dated men occasionally, pleasant, forgettable men who I'd meet pre-work or friends of friends. Relationships that never went anywhere because I could never give them what they needed. I'd go through the motions, dinners, movies, the occasional weekend trip, but my heart was never in it. My mother would ask about my dating life on our Sunday calls. Anyone special? Not really. I'm focused on my career right now. Elizabeth, you're almost 30. You need to start thinking about settling down. I know, Mom. I'm working on it. Working on it meant going to networking events and smiling at eligible men. It meant accepting dates I didn't want to go on. It meant pretending to be interested in building a future with someone when all I could think about was the future I'd walked away from. The years blurred together. I got promoted, moved to Boston for a better position, bought my apartment in Beacon Hill. On paper, my life was everything I'd worked for. In reality, I was slowly suffocating under the weight of my own deception. I'd see couples sometimes, 2 women holding hands, laughing together, and I'd have to look away, the pain too sharp to bear. I'd wonder if one of them was Sarah, if she'd found someone brave enough to choose her, if she was happy. I'd started keeping that box of memories, photographs, the journal I'd kept during our relationship, small mementos of the only time I'd ever been truly myself. I'd look at them sometimes late at night, drinking wine alone in my expensive apartment, wondering how my life had gone so wrong. And then I'd met Marcus. It had been at a networking event for young professionals in Boston, one of those insufferable gatherings where everyone was trying to make connections and climb ladders. I'd been ready to leave when he'd approached me. These events are soul-crushing, aren't they? He'd said, handing me a glass of champagne. I laughed, surprised by his honesty. Absolutely devastating. I'm Marcus Chen, and yes, before you ask, we're probably not related despite the shared last name. Liza Chen, and I wasn't going to ask. Everyone always asks. I have a whole speech prepared about how Chen is an incredibly common surname. and we'd have to trace our family trees back centuries to find a connection. We talked for the rest of the evening. He'd been funny, intelligent, easy to talk to. When he'd asked for my number, I'd given it to him without thinking. Our first date had been coffee, then dinner, then a walk along the Charles River. He'd been a perfect gentleman, respectful, interested, asking questions and actually listening to the answers. "You're different from most people I meet in the city," he'd said. "There's a sadness in you, like you're carrying something heavy." I'd wanted to tell him the truth right then, that I was carrying 7 years of regret, that I'd destroyed the best thing in my life because I'd been too afraid to be myself. But instead, I'd smiled and said, "Everyone's carrying something." We started dating, not because I was attracted to him. I'd felt nothing, no spark, no chemistry, but because he'd been kind and patient, and exactly what my parents would want. Because he'd represented the safe path, the acceptable path, the path that wouldn't require me to face my own truth. Marcus had fallen for the version of me I presented, the successful marketing executive, the dutiful daughter, the woman who had her life together. He'd never
was Chinese American, successful, from a good family, because my mother had actually cried with joy, saying she'd been so worried I'd end up alone, because I'd convinced myself that I could make it work, that love would grow, that companionship and shared goals were enough, that I could be happy living a lie if it meant making everyone else happy. I'd been so wrong. The wedding planning had been hell. My mother had taken over completely, making decisions about flowers and venues and guest lists without consulting me. Every Sunday dinner became a planning session, Marcus and my father nodding along while my mother and I debated between ivory and cream, between roses and peonies. "This is your special day," my mother kept saying. "Everything needs to be perfect." But it wasn't my special day. It was a performance, a pageant, a show for everyone else. Marcus had sensed something was wrong. He wasn't stupid. "You seem distant," he'd said one night, lying in bed in his apartment. "Is everything okay?" "Wedding stress," I'd lied. "You know how my mother is. We could elope, just the two of us, somewhere tropical, skip all this drama." For a moment, I'd almost said yes, not because I wanted to marry him, but because I'd wanted to escape. But eloping wouldn't have solved anything. It would have just been a different kind of trap. "My mother would never forgive us," I'd said instead. "Let's just get through it." But I'd known even then that I wasn't going to make it to the wedding. Something inside me had been breaking, cracking under the pressure of maintaining the lie. I'd started having panic attacks, waking up in the middle of the night, gasping for air, feeling like I was drowning. I'd stand in front of the mirror trying to recognize the person staring back at me and seeing only a stranger. My work had started to suffer. I'd zone out in meetings, forget important details, miss deadlines. My boss had noticed. "Liza, is everything all right? You're not yourself lately." "Wedding planning is just stressful," I'd said, and she'd accepted it because it was easier than digging deeper. That Tuesday evening in October had been the culmination of months of building pressure. I'd been staring at that email to Marcus, trying to find the words to break off our engagement, when I'd realized I couldn't do it over email. I couldn't do it over the phone. I needed to look him in the eye and tell him the truth, even if it destroyed everything. The thought had terrified me and liberated me in equal measure. I'd gone home, opened the box, looked at those photographs of Sarah and me, and finally admitted what I'd known all along. I couldn't marry Marcus. I couldn't keep living this lie. I couldn't sacrifice my truth for anyone else's comfort, not even my parents. The next day, I'd called Rachel. We'd been friends since college, and she'd known about Sarah. Not everything, but enough to understand. "I need to talk to you," I'd said. "Can I come over tonight?" "Of course. What's going on?" "I think I'm about to blow up my entire life." "Well, it's about damn time." Rachel lived in Cambridge, a cozy brownstone she shared with her girlfriend, Amy. Yes, her girlfriend. Rachel had come out our senior year of college, and I'd been happy for her, supportive, all while hiding my own truth so deep I'd almost convinced myself it didn't exist. When I'd arrived that evening, Rachel had taken one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. "Okay," she'd said, leading me to her living room. "Start from the beginning." And so I had. I told her everything. About Sarah, about the depth of my feelings, about the 2 years we'd spent together before I destroyed it all out of fear, about the 7 years I'd spent running from myself, about Marcus and the engagement, and how I'd thought I could make it work, thought I could choose safety over truth. I'm a coward, I'd finished, tears streaming down my face. I'm a coward who's about to ruin a good man's life because I can't face who I really am. Rachel had been quiet for a long moment, processing everything I'd said. Amy had discreetly disappeared into their bedroom, giving us privacy. Liza, Rachel had finally said, you're not a coward. You're terrified, and there's a difference. What your family put you through, the pressure, the expectations, that's real. Your fear is real, but so is your truth. I don't know how to tell him, I'd whispered. Marcus has been planning this wedding, talking about our future, about kids and growing old together. How do I tell him that I've been lying this entire time? That every kiss, every I love you, every moment we've shared has been a performance? With honesty, Rachel had said gently, you tell him the truth. Not your parents' truth, not society's truth, but your truth. And yes, it's going to hurt him. It's going to hurt everyone. But Liza, you're hurting yourself every single day you continue this charade. What about my parents, my father's health? Your father's health is not your responsibility, Rachel had interrupted firmly. You are not responsible for his happiness or your mother's dreams or anyone else's expectations. You're responsible for your own life, your own happiness. And sweetheart, you haven't been happy in years. I've watched you fade, little by little, and it's been killing me. I'd broken down then, sobbing into her shoulder, releasing years of pent-up pain and fear and loneliness. What if I tell everyone and they all hate me? I'd asked between sobs. Then they weren't really loving you anyway, Rachel had said. They were loving the version of you they wanted to see. Real love, Liza, real love sees you and accepts you exactly as you are. We talked for hours. Rachel had shared her own coming-out story, the fear and rejection she'd faced from her conservative Catholic family, but also the freedom and joy she'd found on the other side. She'd shown me pictures from her and Amy's commitment ceremony, the happiness radiating from both of them. This could be you, she said. This authenticity, this peace, but you have to be brave enough to reach for it. Rachel had also been honest about the challenges. I'm not going to lie to you and say it's going to be easy, she'd said. My parents didn't speak to me for 3 years. Some of my siblings still won't acknowledge Amy as my wife. I lost friends, lost job opportunities when I came out at work. It was hard, Liza, really, really hard. Then why did you do it? Because living a lie was killing me. I was drinking too much, having panic attacks, on the verge of a complete breakdown, and one day I realized that I had a choice. I could slowly destroy myself trying to be who everyone else wanted me to be, or I could take the risk of being myself and deal with the consequences. The second option was terrifying, but the first one was certain death. Her words had resonated deep in my soul, because I'd been on that same path, slowly destroying myself, one compromise at a time. What do I do first? I'd asked. You tell Marcus, as soon as possible. He deserves to know the truth, and every day you wait is another day of lying to him. And then you tell your parents, and then you start building a life that's actually yours. When I'd left Rachel's apartment that night, something had shifted inside me. The fear was still there, massive and paralyzing, but underneath it, I felt something else, something that felt like the beginning of courage. I'd asked Marcus to meet me the next evening at our favorite cafe in Back Bay, a quiet place where we'd had our third date, where he'd first told me he could see a future with me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd barely slept the night before, running through different versions of the conversation in my head. How do I tell someone that our entire relationship had been built on a lie? That I'd used him, essentially, to hide from my own truth? There was no good way to do it. There was only honesty, however painful. He'd arrived exactly on time, as always, wearing the navy blazer I'd bought him for his birthday, smiling that warm smile that made me feel like even more of a monster. Hey, beautiful, he'd said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I've been worried about you. You've seemed off lately. We'd ordered coffee, his black, mine with too much cream and sugar, a detail he'd memorized and found endearing, and sat by the window. Marcus, I'd begun, my hands shaking around my cup. We need to talk about something important. His smile had faded. Okay, what's going on? Is it about the wedding? Because if you want to change something, we can... Marcus, I can't marry you. The words had hung in the air between us, sharp and final. His face had gone through a series of expressions. Confusion, hurt, fear, disbelief. What? Did I do something wrong? We can go to couples counseling. It's not you, I'd said, and I meant it. Marcus, you've been nothing but good to me. Kind and patient and supportive. You deserve someone who can love you the way you deserve to be loved. I don't understand. You don't love me? I care about you deeply, but I'm not in love with you. And I've known that for a while now. He'd pulled his hand back, sitting back in his chair, his face hardening. How long have you known? Since the beginning, if I'm honest. The hurt in his eyes had been devastating. Then why did you say yes? To dating me, to moving forward, to marrying me?
Why put us both through this? Because I was trying to be someone I'm not, I'd said, tears starting to fall. I was trying to fit into a life that looked right, that made everyone else happy, that was safe and acceptable and normal. And what's wrong with normal? His voice had an edge now, anger seeping in. What's wrong with what we have? There's nothing wrong with it for someone else. But for me, Marcus, I'm gay. The words felt strange in my mouth, like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. It was the first time I'd said them out loud to anyone except Rachel, the first time I'd claimed my truth so plainly. He'd stared at me, processing. You're gay? Yes. How long have you known? Most of my life. But I've been running from it, hiding it, trying to pretend I could be different. He'd been quiet for a long time, his jaw tight. When he finally spoken, his voice was cold. So our entire relationship has been a lie. 3 years of my life, wasted on someone who was never really there. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I never meant to hurt you. I thought I could make it work, thought maybe I could change, or that love would grow, or you could use me to hide who you really are. He'd stood up abruptly. Did you ever think about what this would do to me? Did you ever consider my feelings in all of this? Every day, I'd said honestly. And that's why I'm telling you now, before we make a mistake we can't undo. A mistake, he laughed bitterly. Right. Well, thank you for that, I guess. For stopping short of actually marrying me before admitting you've been living a lie. Marcus, don't. He held up his hand. I need to go. I can't be here right now. But before he left, he turned back one more time. You know what the worst part is? I really loved you. The version of you I thought I knew, I loved her. And now I'm realizing that person never existed. That every moment we shared was you pretending, performing. Do you have any idea how that feels? I'm so sorry.
Stop apologizing. It doesn't change anything. He'd grabbed his coat. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Liza. I hope being honest makes you happy, because you just destroyed any chance I had at happiness for the foreseeable future. He'd walked out of the cafe, leaving me alone with 2 cups of cooling coffee and the wreckage of another relationship I'd destroyed by trying to be someone I wasn't. I'd sat there for a long time, crying quietly, letting the weight of what I'd done sink in. I'd hurt a good man because I'd been too afraid to face myself. There was no redemption in that, no making it right. All I could do was hope that someday he'd heal from what I'd put him through. My phone had buzzed, a text from my mother. Marcus just called. He's very upset. What happened? Call me immediately. And so it had begun. I hadn't called my mother that night, or the next day. I couldn't face her yet, couldn't handle the questions and disappointment and judgment. Instead, I'd called in sick to work and spent 2 days in my apartment, alternating between crying and staring at the ceiling, feeling everything I'd suppressed for years rising to the surface. Rachel had checked on me daily, bringing food I didn't eat and offering support I didn't deserve. You did the right thing, she'd kept saying. It doesn't feel like it now, but you did. On the 3rd day, my mother had shown up at my apartment unannounced. She'd used the spare key I'd given her for emergencies, letting herself in to find me still in pajamas at 2 in the afternoon, the apartment dark except for the television playing some mindless show I wasn't watching. Elizabeth Chen, what is going on? She'd stood in my living room, hands on hips, worry and anger battling for dominance on her face. I turned off the TV and sat up, pulling a blanket around myself like armor. I broke off the engagement, Mom. Marcus told me that much. What he didn't tell me is why. He seemed devastated, confused. He said you told him you weren't in love with him. How can that be? You've been together for 3 years. Here it had been, the moment I'd been dreading my entire adult life. Mom, sit down, please. She'd perched on the edge of my couch, rigid with tension. I need to tell you something about myself, something I should have told you a long time ago. If this is about that phase you went through in college, it wasn't a phase. My voice had been firmer than I'd expected. Mom, I'm gay. I've always been gay. And I can't marry Marcus or any other man because it would be living a lie. The silence that had followed had been deafening. I'd watched my mother's face cycle through denial, shock, anger, and something that had looked like grief. No, she'd finally said. No, you're confused. You're stressed about the wedding, having cold feet. This is normal. Mom, I was in a relationship with a woman for 2 years in graduate school. Her name was Sarah, and I loved her more than I've ever loved anyone. I broke up with her because I was too afraid to tell you and Dad. I've been living a lie ever since, and I can't do it anymore. My mother had stood up, pacing now.
This is that girl's influence, isn't it? That Rachel, she put these ideas in your head. Rachel didn't do anything except be honest about who she is, something I should have done years ago. Your father, my mother had said, her voice shaking. This will kill your father, his heart. His heart will be fine, Mom. And if it's not, that's not my responsibility. I can't live my life trying to protect Dad from reality. Reality, her voice had risen. Reality is that you're throwing away a wonderful man, a good future, for some selfish fantasy. It's not a fantasy, Mom. It's who I am. And I'm sorry if that disappoints you, if it's not what you wanted for me, but I can't keep pretending. She'd stopped pacing, facing me with tears in her eyes. Do you have any idea what this will do to our family? What people will say? Your grandmother, the church community, our friends? I don't care what they say. I care about living an honest life. Honest. She spat the word. There's nothing honest about this. You're being selfish, Elizabeth. You're thinking only of yourself. I've spent my entire life thinking of everyone but myself. I'd stood up too, years of suppressed anger finally finding its voice. I've done everything you ever asked. I went to the right school, got the right job, dated the right people. I've performed for you my entire life. And I'm exhausted, Mom. I'm exhausted from pretending to be someone I'm not. Then maybe you should have tried harder, she'd shouted. Do you think life is about doing whatever makes you happy? Life is about duty, family, doing what's right. And what's right is living a lie? Marrying someone I don't love? Making myself miserable to make you comfortable? We'd stood facing each other, both of us crying now, years of unspoken tension finally erupting. I sacrificed everything for you, my mother had said, her voice breaking. I gave up my career, my dreams, everything to raise you and your brother. I did it so you could have opportunities I never had. And this is how you repay me? By throwing it all away? You didn't sacrifice for me, Mom. You sacrificed for the version of me you wanted. The perfect daughter who would do everything right, marry the right man, give you grandchildren to show off. But that's not me. That's never been me. Then who are you? She demanded, because I don't recognize this person standing in front of me. I'm someone who wants to be happy, someone who wants to live authentically, someone who's tired of being ashamed of who she loves. You should be ashamed, my mother had said coldly. What you're doing is unnatural. It's wrong. And if you go through with this, if you choose this lifestyle, you're choosing to break this family apart. The word lifestyle had cut deep, as if my identity was a choice, a whim, something I could turn on and off like a light switch. If the family breaks apart, it's because you're choosing your own comfort over your daughter's happiness. It's because you'd rather have a daughter who's miserable and acceptable than one who's happy and authentic. My mother had picked up her purse, her hand shaking. I need to leave. I can't look at you right now. Mom, don't. Don't call me. Don't come to Sunday dinner. Not until you've come to your senses and realized what a mistake you're making. What if this isn't a mistake? What if this is who I really am? She'd stopped at the door, her back to me. Then I don't have a daughter anymore. The door had closed behind her, and I'd collapsed back onto the couch, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. I'd done it. I'd told the truth. And it had cost me everything. The weeks that followed had been the darkest of my life. My mother had refused to speak to me. My father had called once, his voice weak and disappointed, telling me I'd broken my mother's heart and he didn't know if he could forgive me. Your mother and I raised you better than this, he'd said. We taught you right from wrong. You taught me to hide who I am, I'd replied, my voice shaking. You taught me that love is conditional, that acceptance comes with requirements. We taught you to respect your family, to honor your heritage, to live with dignity. And I'm trying to do that, Dad. I'm trying to live with dignity by being honest about who I am. There's no dignity in this. There's only shame. You've brought shame on this family, Elizabeth. I don't know if I can forgive that. He'd hung up, and I'd sat there staring at my phone, feeling like I'd been orphaned. My brother David had called a few days later. He was in his final year of college, and he'd been caught in the middle of our family's implosion. Mom's a mess, he'd said. She's not eating, barely sleeping. Dad's worried about her. I'm sorry, David. I never wanted to hurt anyone. Then why are you doing this? Why can't you just, I don't know, work it out with Marcus? He seemed like a good guy. Because I can't marry someone I don't love. because I can't live a lie for the rest of my life. Is it really that bad? I mean, lots of people aren't madly in love with their spouses. They make it work. Would you want to marry someone you weren't in love with? He'd been quiet for a moment. No, I guess not. Then why should I? Because you're not. He trailed off. Not what? Not straight? Not normal? Say it, David. I don't know how to talk about this, Liza. I don't understand it. Mom and Dad are devastated, and you seem to just not care. I care more than you know, but I can't sacrifice my entire life to protect their feelings. So what happens now? We just pretend you don't exist? I don't know. I hope not, but that's up to them, not me. After David had hung up, I'd felt more alone than ever. My family had been fractured, maybe beyond repair, and it had been my fault. Not for being gay, but for waiting so long to tell the truth. For building a life on lies that had inevitably collapsed. Marcus had told people at my office what had happened. Not the full story, just that I'd broken off the engagement. The pitying looks from my colleagues had been almost worse than the judgment. My boss had called me into her office to check in, her concern feeling more like surveillance. We value you here, Liza, but we need to make sure your personal issues don't affect your work. They won't, I'd assured her, even though it was a lie. Everything was affecting my work. I could barely concentrate, barely function. Good, because we're counting on you for the Stevenson account, and we can't afford any mistakes. I'd wanted to quit on the spot, but I needed the health insurance, the stability, the distraction. So I smiled and assured her I was fine, perfectly fine, and gone back to my office to stare at my computer screen and pretend to work. The only person who had stood by me was Rachel. She and Amy had become my lifeline, inviting me over for dinners, checking in daily, reminding me that I had value beyond my family's approval. It gets better, Rachel had promised. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but it does. The beginning is the hardest part. I wanted to believe her, but I'd been drowning in grief. The loss of my family, the guilt over Marcus, the terror of facing an uncertain future. It had all been overwhelming. Late at night, alone in my apartment, I'd look at the pictures of Sarah, wondering where she was, what she was doing. I'd searched for her on social media once, but hadn't been able to bring myself to reach out. What would I even say? Hey, sorry I broke your heart 7 years ago because I was a coward, but guess what? I'm still a coward, just a more honest one. One particularly dark night, about 6 weeks after breaking off the engagement, I'd sat on my bathroom floor with a bottle of sleeping pills, seriously contemplating whether anyone would miss me if I just stopped. My phone had rung.
Rachel had pulled me into a hug. That's because you spent 27 years building a life on a foundation of lies, and you just demolished it. Of course you feel empty. You're standing in the rubble of everything you thought you were supposed to be. But Liza, now you get to build something real, something true, something yours. What if I don't know how? What if I've been performing for so long that I don't even know who the real me is? Then we figure it out together. You're not alone in this, even though I know it feels that way. She'd stayed with me that night, sleeping on my couch, checking on me every few hours. In the morning, she'd made me coffee and told me about the LGBTQ community center in Boston, about support groups for people like me, about therapists who specialized in helping people navigate coming out later in life. You're not alone in this, she'd said. You feel alone because you've isolated yourself for so long, but there's an entire community of people who understand exactly what you're going through, people who've been where you are and made it to the other side. I hadn't believed her, but I'd agreed to go to a support group meeting that Thursday, if only to prove to her that I was okay, that I wasn't going to do anything stupid. But that meeting had changed everything. The meeting had been held in a small room at the community center, fold-in chairs arranged in a circle, a table with coffee and cookies that had reminded me of church basement gatherings from my childhood. I'd almost left 3 times before the meeting had started. Every instinct had screamed at me to run, to go back to my apartment and hide from the world. But Rachel's words had echoed in my head. You're not alone. Then a woman had sat down next to me, smiled, and said, "First time?" I'd nodded, unable to speak. "I'm Jennifer. I promise it's not as scary as it seems. Well, it's a little scary, but also really helpful." The group had been diverse, people of all ages, backgrounds, identities. Some had been out for decades. Others were fresh out of the closet like me. There had been an older gentleman in his 70s, a couple of college students, a woman who looked like she'd come straight from a business meeting. The facilitator, a kind-faced man named David, had opened the meeting by reminding everyone that this was a safe space, that whatever was shared stayed in the room. "Who wants to start?" he'd asked. An older woman, probably in her 60s, had raised her hand. "I'm Margaret. I came out 2 years ago after 40 years of marriage. My husband and I divorced, and my adult children aren't speaking to me. Some days I wonder if I made the right choice." "And other days?" David had prompted gently. Margaret had smiled, her entire face transforming. "Other days I wake up next to my girlfriend and feel more alive than I ever did in 40 years of pretending. I spent 4 decades being someone else's wife, someone else's mother, someone else's idea of who I should be. And now, for the first time in my life, I'm just Margaret, and that's enough." Others had shared their stories. A young man, maybe 19, who'd been kicked out of his home at 17 and had lived on the streets for 6 months before finding his way to a shelter and then to this group. A woman who'd lost her job when her company had found out she was transitioning. A couple who'd adopted 2 children and fought for years for the legal right to both be recognized as parents. A man in his 40s who'd been married to a woman for 15 years before finally admitting to himself that he was gay. He'd lost his wife, his house, access to his kids for a while, but he'd rebuilt. "The worst part wasn't losing my marriage," he'd said. "It was losing all those years. I look back at my 20s, my 30s, and I see someone who was barely living, just going through the motions, playing a role, and I can't get those years back." Each story had been different, but the thread running through all of them had been the same: the cost of truth and the price of hiding. When it had come to my turn, I'd hesitated, my throat tight with unshed tears. "It's okay if you're not ready," David had said kindly. "You can just listen tonight if you prefer." But I'd been ready. Ready or not, I'd needed to say it out loud, needed to claim my story in front of people who would understand. "I'm Liza," I'd begun, my voice shaking. "I'm 34. I broke off my engagement 6 weeks ago because I finally admitted to myself and everyone else that I'm gay. My family won't speak to me. I hurt a good man who didn't deserve it. I feel like I've destroyed everything, and I don't know how to build it back. I don't even know if I want to build it back, or if I should just start over completely." "What made you decide to come out now?" someone had asked. I realized I was more afraid of living a lie for the rest of my life than I was of losing everything. I woke up one day and couldn't breathe, couldn't function, couldn't keep pretending. It was like my body was rebelling against the lie my mind had been telling. "That's a common experience," David had said. "Our bodies often know our truth before our minds are ready to accept it." After the meeting, several people had come up to talk to me, sharing their own experiences, offering encouragement. Jennifer, the woman had sat next to me, had invited me to coffee. "I came out at 38, she told me over lattes at a nearby cafe. Divorced, 2 kids, the whole 9 yards. That was 12 years ago. My ex-husband eventually forgave me. Took him about 5 years, but we're cordial now. My kids were young enough that they adjusted. They're teenagers now, and they're great. They've grown up knowing both their mom and my wife. It's normal to them." "You're married?" I'd asked. 7 years. Her name's Patricia. We met at a support group, actually, not unlike the one you just came from. She'd been out since college, but had never found the right person. We just clicked." "How did you get through it? The beginning part, when everything was falling apart?" Jennifer had thought about it, her fingers wrapped around her coffee cup. "One day at a time. Some days 1 hour at a time. Some days 1 minute at a time. I built a new family, a chosen family of people who loved me for who I really was. And eventually, some of my biological family came around too. Not all of them. I have an aunt who still won't speak to me, a cousin who sends me religious pamphlets every Christmas. But enough came around that I don't feel completely disconnected from my roots." "Do you ever regret it?" She thought about it for a long moment. "I regret the pain I caused my ex-husband. I regret not being brave enough to figure myself out before I got married and had kids. But regret who I am? Regret choosing authenticity over comfort? Never. For the first time in my life, I'm actually living, not just existing, and that's worth all the pain of getting here." I'd started going to the group regularly. Thursday nights had become sacred, a space where I could be honest, where I didn't have to perform or pretend.
I'd met people who became friends, who understood the specific kind of grief that came with choosing authenticity over acceptance. There was Marcus, a different Marcus than my ex-fiancé, who'd come out at 50 after his children were grown. There was Keisha, a black woman my age who was navigating the intersection of racial and LGBTQ identities in her conservative family. There was Tom and Rick, a couple in their 60s who'd been together for 30 years, who remembered the AIDS crisis and the fight for marriage equality. They'd all welcomed me, shared their wisdom, offered support without judgment, and slowly, very slowly, I'd started to feel less empty. Rachel had convinced me to start seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Patricia Torres, who specialized in LGBTQ issues and family trauma. Our first session, Dr. Torres had asked me a simple question. Liza, when was the last time you felt truly happy? I thought about it for a long time, going back through years of my life. With Sarah, 7 years ago, before I let fear win. Tell me about her. So I told her about Sarah's wild red hair and paint-splattered overalls, about lazy Sunday mornings in her apartment, about feeling seen and known and loved for who I really was. I told her about the art she'd created, the way she'd seen the world differently than anyone I'd ever met, about how she challenged me to be better, to be braver, to be myself. I told her about the guilt that had driven me to end it, the years of regret that had followed. Do you still love her? Dr. Torres had asked. I don't know. I love who she was, who we were together, but that was a long time ago. She's probably moved on, built a life with someone brave enough to choose her, someone who didn't waste her time hiding and lying. And you haven't moved on. It hadn't been a question, but I'd answered anyway. No, I built a life instead, or tried to. Turned out it was just an elaborate set for a play I was performing in, beautiful from the outside, completely empty on the inside. Why do you think you stayed in that play for so long? I'd struggled to articulate it. Because it was easier than facing the truth. Because I was terrified of disappointing my parents. Because I thought if I just tried hard enough, I could make myself be who everyone wanted me to be. And how did that work out? I laughed bitterly. I had a panic attack planning my wedding to a man I didn't love, and destroyed my relationship with my entire family when I finally admitted the truth. So not great. Over the following weeks and months, Dr. Torres had helped me peel back layers of conditioning and fear. She'd helped me understand that my parents' rejection wasn't about me. It was about their own fears, their own rigid understanding of the world, their inability to love beyond their expectations. Your mother grew up in a culture where conformity was survival, Dr. Torres had explained. To her, your coming out isn't just about sexuality. It's about you rejecting everything she believes makes life safe and good. In her worldview, going against social norms leads to isolation, poverty, suffering. She's not trying to hurt you. She's trying to protect you the only way she knows how. But she is hurting me. Yes, she is. And that's the tragedy of it. She's hurting you in her attempt to save you from what she perceives as a worse fate. So how do I make her understand? You can't make anyone understand, Liza. You can only control your own actions, your own truth. Whether she chooses to accept that is up to her. Your job isn't to convince her or change her mind. Your job is to live your life authentically and let the consequences unfold as they will. What if she never accepts me? Dr. Torres had looked at me with compassionate eyes. Then you grieve that relationship and build a life.
It was slow going, but I'd started to make progress. I'd started journaling again, not about my day or my feelings, but about who I was, what I actually enjoyed doing, not what I thought I should enjoy, what I wanted from life, not what others expected of me. Some of the discoveries were small. I actually hated marketing. I'd chosen it because it seemed practical, lucrative, respectable, but it didn't fulfill me. I'd always been drawn to creative writing, to storytelling, but I'd dismissed it as impractical. Other discoveries were bigger. I'd spent so much energy hiding my sexuality that I'd never actually explored it. I didn't know what I was attracted to, what I wanted in a partner, what kind of relationship would make me happy. That's okay, Dr. Torres had assured me. You're essentially going through adolescence in your 30s. Most people figure this stuff out in their teens and 20s. You're just doing it on a delayed timeline. Be patient with yourself. 3 months after coming out, after countless therapy sessions and support group meetings, I'd sat down and written a letter to my parents. Not an email, not a text, but an actual handwritten letter. Pages and pages of everything I needed to say. Dr. Torres had suggested it as an exercise, whether I sent it or not. Sometimes we need to say things, even if the other person isn't ready to hear them, she'd said. Write everything you want them to know. Don't censor yourself. You can decide later whether to send it. So I'd written, Dear Mom and Dad, I know you're angry with me. I know you're disappointed, hurt, confused. I know my coming out has caused you pain, and for that, I'm truly sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. You're my parents, and despite everything, I love you. But I need you to understand something. I didn't choose this. I didn't wake up one day and decide to make my life harder, to disappoint you, to challenge everything you believe. I have been gay my entire life. It's not a phase, not a choice, not something that can be prayed away or therapized out of me. It's as fundamental to who I am as the color of my eyes or the fact that I'm left-handed. What I chose was to finally stop lying about it. For 27 years, I tried to be the daughter you wanted. I got good grades, went to the right schools, pursued the right career. I dated men, got engaged, planned a wedding. I did everything I thought would make you proud, make you love me. But here's what I've realized. You didn't love me. You loved the version of me I presented, the one that fit your expectations, and that's not the same thing. Real love sees someone fully and accepts them anyway. Real love doesn't require someone to hide who they are to earn approval. Real love is unconditional. I'm not asking you to understand my sexuality. I'm not asking you to celebrate it or march in pride parades or put rainbow flags on your lawn. I'm asking you to see me, really see me, and love me anyway. I'm asking you to love your daughter more than you love other people's opinions. I'm asking you to choose me over your fears. Dad, you've told me your whole life that family comes first. Well, I'm your family. I'm your daughter, and I'm still here, still the same person I've always been, just finally being honest about it. Mom, you've always said you want me to be happy. I'm trying to be happy. I'm trying to build a life that's authentic and true. That starts with being honest about who I am. I love you both. I always will. But I can't keep lighting myself on fire to keep you warm. I can't keep living a lie to protect you from a truth that's always been there. I know this is hard for you. I know it challenges everything you believe. I know you're worried about what other people will think, what our relatives will say, how this reflects on you. But I need you to understand, this isn't about you. This is about me, finally choosing to live authentically after decades of hiding. If you can't accept me as I am, I understand. It will break my heart, but I understand. Just know that the door is always open. I'm not going anywhere. If and when you're ready to have a real relationship with the real me, I'll be here. I've started therapy. I've joined a support group. I'm working on building a life that's honest and authentic. I'm learning who I am beyond the performance I've been giving for 34 years. And you know what? For the first time in my life, I'm starting to like myself. Not the version of me that makes everyone else comfortable, but the real me, the messy, complicated, imperfect me who happens to be gay. I hope someday you'll be able to see her and love her too. Love always, Elizabeth. I'd read it over dozens of times, editing and re-editing, trying to strike the right balance between honesty and compassion, between standing my ground and leaving the door open. Finally, I'd sealed it in an envelope and mailed it before I could change my mind. And then I'd waited. Days passed, then weeks. No response. I tried not to let it crush me, but the silence was deafening. Every day I checked the mail, hoping for something, anything. An angry letter would have been better than nothing. At least anger meant they were engaging, processing, feeling something other than complete rejection. Rachel reminded me that healing wasn't linear, that sometimes people needed time, that I couldn't control their response. You did what you needed to do, she said. You told your truth. What they do with it is up to them. But the waiting was agony. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, checking my phone for missed calls, composing imaginary conversations with my mother where she finally understood,
where she wrapped me in her arms and told me she loved me no matter what. Those conversations never happened. Work became my refuge and my prison. I threw myself into campaigns and presentations, staying late at the office, volunteering for projects no one else wanted, anything to avoid going home to my empty apartment and sitting with the silence. But I couldn't escape myself forever. One night, about 4 months after I'd come out, I'd been working late on the Stevenson account when I'd had a realization. I hated this job. I hated the corporate politics, the meaningless metrics, the way we manipulated people into buying things they didn't need. I'd chosen marketing because it seemed practical, because my parents had approved, because it fit the image of the successful daughter. But it wasn't me. I'd opened my laptop and started searching for graduate programs in creative writing. Just browsing, I told myself, just looking. But the more I looked, the more I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Excitement, possibility, the sense that maybe, just maybe, I could build a life that actually belonged to me. I'd favorited some out programs, Columbia, NYU, Emerson, programs that would let me explore the storytelling I'd always loved, the writing I'd abandoned because it wasn't practical enough. Then I'd close the laptop, feeling foolish. I was 34 years old with a mortgage and bills and responsibilities. I couldn't just throw away my career to chase some childhood dream. But the seed had been planted. The next Thursday, I brought it up at the support group. I've been thinking about making a career change, I'd said. Something that actually feels authentic to who I am. But I'm scared. I'm 34. Is it too late to start over? Margaret, the 60-something woman who'd come out after 40 years of marriage, had laughed. Honey, I came out at 62. If you're too old at 34, what does that make me? I started medical school at 40, another member, a trans woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, had added. I'd spent my whole life living as someone else, working in a career that made my family happy. When I finally transitioned, I realized I'd always wanted to be a doctor. So I went to medical school. It was hard as hell, but I did it. And now I'm a practicing physician and I've never been happier. The question isn't whether you're too old, David, the facilitator, had said. The question is, do you want to spend the next 30 years of your life doing something that doesn't fulfill you just because you've already invested time in it? That's called the sunk cost fallacy, and it's a terrible way to make life decisions. Their words resonated deep in my soul. I'd already wasted so much time living for other people. Did I really want to waste more? That night, I'd started working on application essays for creative writing programs. Not because I was definitely going to apply, but because I needed to explore the possibility. And for the first time in months, I felt something other than grief and fear. I felt hope. 4 months after breaking off the engagement, on a random Tuesday afternoon, I'd been at a coffee shop near my apartment, working on my laptop, when someone sat down at the table next to me. I'd glanced up automatically and frozen. Sarah. 7 years older, her hair shorter now, wearing glasses I didn't remember, but unmistakably her. The same green eyes, the same slight smile, the same presence that had always made me feel like the world had shifted slightly on its axis. Our eyes met, and time seemed to stop. Liza, she said softly. Hi. Sarah. My voice came out as a whisper. What are you? Do you live in Boston? I moved here 6 months ago. Got a position teaching at Mass Art. 6 months. She'd been in the same city as me for 6 months, and we'd never crossed paths until now. Can I sit? She gestured to the empty chair at my table. I nodded, unable to form words. She sat down, and we stared at each other, 7 years of silence stretching between us like a chasm. You look good, she said softly. Different, but good. Your hair's shorter. She laughed softly, touching the frame self-consciously. Getting old? Turns out staring at tiny brushstrokes for hours a day is bad for your eyes. How have you been? How had I been? How could I possibly summarize 7 years in a coffee shop conversation? Complicated, I settled on. You? Same. Liza, I've thought about you a lot over the years. Wondered how you were, if you were happy? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't, I said honestly. I got engaged to a man, spent 3 years living a lie.
We exchanged numbers, and she hugged me goodbye. As I walked home, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, the sensation that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. Sarah and I started meeting for coffee every week. Just coffee, just talking, rebuilding a friendship that had been shattered by fear and circumstance. She told me about her art, about the pieces she was creating, about her students at MassArt who reminded her why she loved teaching. I told her about my work, about the support group, about the slow process of becoming myself. "I'm proud of you," she said one afternoon, 3 weeks into our renewed friendship. "I know how hard this must have been. I wish I'd been brave enough to do it years ago. We could have—" "Don't," she interrupted gently. "Don't play the what-if game. It'll drive you crazy. We're both here now, both whole, both on our own journeys. That's what matters." But there was something still there between us, an undercurrent of possibility, of unfinished business. I felt it every time she laughed, every time our hands accidentally touched, every time she looked at me with those green eyes that still saw straight through me. 6 weeks into our renewed friendship, she invited me to her apartment for dinner. "Nothing fancy," she said, "just pasta and wine and good conversation." Her apartment was pure Sarah, art everywhere, canvases in various states of completion leaning against walls, plants in every window, books stacked on every surface. There was a half-finished mural on one wall, abstract shapes in blues and greens that seemed to flow like water. "I got permission from my landlord," she said, catching me staring at it. "Told him I'd paint over it when I move out, but he actually likes it, says it adds character." "It's beautiful. You're still as talented as ever." "More, I hope. 7 years of practice should count for something." We cooked together, falling into an easy rhythm. She chopped vegetables while I boiled water for pasta, and we moved around each other in the small kitchen like we'd done it 1,000 times before. It felt like coming home. Over dinner, conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from politics to philosophy to our shared love of bad reality TV. We laughed about the awful dating shows we both secretly watched, debated the merits of various art movements, discussed our favorite authors. But underneath it all was a tension, a question neither of us was asking. Finally, as we were washing dishes, Sarah turned to me. "Liza, I need to ask you something." "Okay." She dried her hands on a towel, not looking at me. "Is this just friendship for you? Because if it is, that's fine. I value having you in my life in any capacity. But I need to know because—" She took a deep breath. "Because I'm still in love with you. I've been in love with you for 7 years, and seeing you again, spending time with you, it's all coming back. Every feeling I thought I'd buried, every hope I thought I'd let go of. And I need to know if I'm alone in this, or if you feel it too." My heart was racing. I set down the dish I was holding, turned to face her fully. "Sarah?" "You don't have to say anything if you're not ready," she said quickly. "I just needed you to know. I spent too many years not being honest about my feelings, hiding what I wanted, and I don't want to make that mistake again. So I'm telling you, I love you. I've always loved you. And if there's any chance—" I kissed her. I pulled her to me and kissed her like I was 23 years old again, like no time had passed, like we were back in her apartment in Brooklyn, and the world was full of possibility. She kissed me back, her hands in my hair, and it was like finding a piece of myself I thought was lost forever. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathing hard, I said, "I've been in love with you since I was 23 years old. Breaking up with you was the biggest mistake of my life. And yes, I need to keep working on myself, keep going to therapy, keep learning how to be comfortable in my own skin. But Sarah, I don't want to do that alone. I want to do it with you, if you'll have me, if you can forgive me for the time I wasted, the pain I caused." "There's nothing to forgive," she whispered against my lips. "We were both doing the best we could, and we're here now. That's what matters." We talked late into the night, curled up on her couch, making promises we both knew we'd keep this time. I'm not hiding anymore, I said. I'm out to my family, out at work, out to anyone who asks. I'm done performing, done pretending. If we do this, I want to do it right. I want everyone to know you're mine. I like the sound of that, she said, smiling. But Liza, I need you to know, I'm not going to be your project. I'm not here to fix you or complete you or make you whole. You have to do that work yourself. I know, and I am. I'm in therapy, I'm in a support group, I'm working on figuring out who I am beyond all the roles I've played. But I want you with me while I do it, not as my savior, but as my partner. Then we're doing this? We're doing this. She kissed me again, slow and sweet and full of promise. By the way, she said, pulling back to look at me, I think you should apply to those writing programs. Chase that dream. Life's too short to keep doing things that don't fulfill you. How did you know about the writing programs? You mentioned them, and your whole face lit up when you talked about it. That's how I know it's right for you. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Sarah and I were officially together, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't hiding it. I changed my relationship status on social media. I brought her to support group, where everyone celebrated with us. I told Rachel, who actually cried with happiness. I'm so glad you found your way back to each other, Rachel said, hugging me tight. You two make sense together in a way you and Marcus never did. I also started the process of applying to creative writing programs. Sarah helped me revise my application essays, providing feedback that was honest but encouraging. You're holding back here, she'd say, pointing to a paragraph. You're being too polite, too measured. Let yourself be raw. Let yourself be real. It was good practice for life in general, learning to be raw, to be real, to stop editing myself for an imaginary audience. At work, things were more complicated. I hadn't officially come out to my colleagues, but the broken engagement had raised questions. When people asked about my personal life, I'd been vague. But one day, about 2 months after Sarah and I had gotten back together, a colleague asked about my weekend plans. My girlfriend and I are going to the MFA, I said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. The colleague had blinked, processed, then smiled. That sounds nice. I love the MFA. And that was it. No drama, no judgment, just acceptance. Of course, not everyone was so accepting. My boss had called me into her office a few days later. Liza, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know this is purely for HR purposes. My stomach had dropped. Okay. Are you in a same-sex relationship? Yes. Is that a problem? No, of course not. We're an equal opportunity employer. I just need to know for our diversity statistics. And honestly, between you and me, I'm glad you seem happier. You've been much more engaged at work lately. It was true. Knowing I didn't have to hide, didn't have to monitor every word and action, had freed up mental energy I hadn't realized I'd been wasting on performance. But the biggest challenge still loomed: my family. I hadn't heard from them since my mother had walked out 4 months ago. No response to my letter, no acknowledgement of my existence. My birthday had come and gone without a word. Thanksgiving was approaching, and I had no idea if I was welcome at the family table. You could reach out, Sarah suggested one evening as we cooked dinner together in her apartment. Let them know the door is still open. I don't know if I can handle another rejection. Or they might surprise you. People change. They grow. They process at their own pace. I thought about it for days before finally sending a text to my mother. Thanksgiving is next week. Am I welcome at dinner? 3 days of silence. Then finally, we'd like you to come. Just you. Just you. Not you and Sarah. Not you and whoever you're with. Just you. It was conditional acceptance at best, but it was something. I drove to my parents' house alone, leaving Sarah in Boston. It hurt to leave her behind, to once again partition my life into acceptable and unacceptable pieces. But Dr. Torres had reminded me that healing was incremental, that I couldn't expect my parents to transform overnight. You're showing up authentically.
Even if they're not ready to meet all of you yet, she'd said, that's progress. The house looked exactly the same as it always had. My mother's garden, now dormant for winter. My father's car in the driveway. The wreath on the door that my mother put up every November. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, gathering courage, before finally walking to the door. My mother answered, looking older than I remembered, thinner, more tired. Elizabeth, she said. Not warm, but not hostile either. Neutral. Hi, Mom. We stood there awkwardly until my father appeared behind.
She took my hand. I'm proud of you, Elizabeth. I'm proud of your courage, your honesty, your strength. It couldn't have been easy, coming out, losing your family for a while, rebuilding everything, but you did it, and I'm proud. I'd hugged her, both of us crying, years of tension and pain and misunderstanding finally beginning to heal. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. I always have. I just didn't know how to show it. 2 years after coming out, my life looked completely different. I was in my second year of the MFA program at Emerson, loving every minute of it. My writing had improved dramatically, and I'd even had a short story published in a literary magazine. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Sarah and I had moved in together, a sunny apartment in Somerville that we decorated with her art and my books. We had routines: Sunday morning farmers market, Tuesday night creative dates where we both worked on our projects side by side, Friday dinners with Rachel and Amy. My relationship with my parents continued to improve. They'd started coming to our apartment for dinner occasionally. My mother had even asked Sarah for gardening advice, bonding over their shared love of plants. David had come out as well. Bisexual, he told us over Thanksgiving dinner. Our parents had handled it better with him, having already gone through the process with me. They'd grown. I'd started speaking at LGBTQ events, sharing my story of coming out later in life. After each talk, someone would approach me, usually in tears, thanking me for putting into words what they'd been feeling. I'm 42, one woman had said. I've been married to a man for 20 years. I have 3 kids, and I've known I was gay the whole time. Hearing your story, it gives me hope that it's not too late. It's never too late, I told her. It's scary and hard, and you'll lose things, but you'll gain yourself, and that's worth everything. One day, about 2.5 years after coming out, I'd been working on my thesis, a memoir about the process of coming out and rebuilding my life, when Sarah had come home with exciting news. I got a gallery show, she'd announced, a real one, at the Miller Gallery downtown. They want to feature my work for a whole month. We'd celebrated, dancing around our apartment, thrilled by this validation of her talent. At the opening, my parents had come. They'd looked at Sarah's art, bold, beautiful pieces that explored themes of identity and authenticity and love, and my mother had said, quietly, "She's very talented." "She is," I'd agreed. "You chose well," my mother had said, and then more quietly, "I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." Standing there in that gallery, surrounded by Sarah's art, and our chosen family and our biological family learning to accept us, I'd felt a sense of peace I'd never known before. This was the life I'd chosen. Messy, complicated, real, mine. 5 years after coming out, I graduated from the MFA program. My thesis had been accepted by a small press and was being published as a memoir. The book launch was at a bookstore in Cambridge. Sarah was there, my parents, Rachel and Amy, David and Jessica, married now, Jennifer and the support group friends, my classmates from Emerson. When it was my turn to read, I'd chosen a passage from the final chapter. My darkest secret, the one I carried for 27 years, wasn't that I was gay. It was that I believed I was only worthy of love if I pretended to be someone else. It was the deep, shameful conviction that my authentic self was something to hide, something to be ashamed of, something that would make me unlovable. Coming out didn't just mean telling people I was gay. It meant choosing to believe that I was worthy of worth exactly as I am. It meant learning that authenticity is more valuable than acceptance, that truth is more precious than comfort, that being myself, flawed, complicated, messy, real, is enough. The journey hasn't been easy.
I lost things I thought I couldn't live without. I hurt people I cared about. I demolished a life I'd spent years building and had to start over from scratch. But I gained something invaluable: myself. I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing truth despite the fear. It's showing up as yourself even when you're terrified of rejection. It's building a life that's authentic even when a false life would be easier. I learned that family isn't just the people you're born to. It's the people who choose you, who see you, who love you for exactly who you are. I learned that it's never too late to choose yourself, never too late to live authentically, never too late to build a life that actually belongs to you. My darkest secret became my greatest truth. I am gay, I am whole, I am worthy of love, and I am finally, beautifully, authentically myself. When I finished reading, the applause was thunderous. But what meant more than the applause were the people who approached me afterward. A woman in her 50s. I just came out last year. Thank you for writing this. A man in his 60s. I've been hiding my whole life. Your book is giving me courage. A young person, maybe 20. My parents kicked me out. But reading her story, knowing there's hope for reconciliation someday, it helps. Sarah had stood beside me the whole time, proud and supportive and completely herself. That night, lying in bed in the apartment we shared, I'd reflected on how far I'd come. From that 7-year-old hiding in a closet to the 39-year-old published author living openly with the woman she loved. From performance to authenticity. From hiding to being seen. From fear to freedom. What are you thinking? Sarah had asked, tracing patterns on my arm. I'm thinking about how grateful I am. For you, for this life, for the courage to finally choose myself. I'm grateful too, she'd said. For you, for us, for the journey that brought us here. Even the painful parts, especially the painful parts. They made us who we are. I'd kissed her, this woman who'd seen me at my worst and loved me anyway, who'd waited for me to find my way home. My darkest secret, my queerness, my truth, my authentic self, had become my greatest strength. It had led me to real love, real community, real purpose. It had led me to a life that was messy and complicated, and beautifully, perfectly mine. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, Sarah's hand in mine, I'd felt something I'd spent most of my life searching for: peace. Not the peace of a life without struggle, but the peace of a life lived honestly. The peace of showing up as yourself, of being seen and loved for who you really are, of building something real on a foundation of truth. My journey of self-discovery wasn't over. It would never be over. I was still learning, still growing, still becoming. But I was doing it as myself. And that made all the difference.